Imagine building a multi-billion-dollar company from your garage, working day and night for 9 years, only to be kicked out of your own creation. In 1985, Apple did exactly that to its founder, Steve Jobs. They thought they didn't need him anymore. But little did they know, this decision would lead Apple to the brink of total collapse. And 12 years later, they would have to beg him to come back. This isn't just a business story. This is the greatest corporate revenge in history. Steve Jobs was never an easy man to work with. He was a relentless perfectionist, demanding nothing short of excellence. This intensity often led to fierce clashes with Apple's high-ranking officials. By 1985, the tension reached a boiling point. At the time, John Sculley was the CEO, the very man Jobs had recruited from Pepsi with that legendary question, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world?" Ironically, Sculley teamed up with the board to strip Jobs of all power. Left with no choice, Jobs resigned and walked away. By the summer of 1997, the tech world was ready to write Apple's obituary. The company was a ghost of its former self. They were bleeding cash so fast that they had less than 90 days of operational capital left. If a miracle didn't happen, the lights at one infinite loop would go out forever. The CEO at the time, Gil Amelio, made a desperate $429 million bet. He bought Next, the company Steve Jobs had built in the shadows. With that purchase, Apple didn't just buy software. They bought back the soul they had thrown out 12 years earlier. Jobs walked back into Apple as an advisor, but he wasn't there to give advice. He was there to lead. Within weeks, he outmaneuvered the board, replaced the CEO, and took the throne as the interim CEO. His first act? A phone call to his greatest enemy, Bill Gates. At the 1997 Macworld Expo, a giant image of Bill Gates towered over Jobs on stage. The audience booed in shock. They felt betrayed. But Jobs remained calm. He had secured a $150 million investment from Microsoft. It wasn't just about the money, it was about survival. He famously told the crowd, "We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose." Jobs then began a brutal cleansing. He walked into product meetings and asked, "Which of these should I tell my friends to buy?" When the engineers couldn't give a straight answer, Jobs took a marker and drew a simple grid on a whiteboard. Desktop, portable, consumer, and pro. He killed 70% of Apple's products overnight. Thousands lost their jobs, but the bleeding stopped. The 90-day clock was no longer a countdown to death. It was a countdown to a new beginning. With the company stabilized, Jobs turned his eyes toward the future. He didn't want to build just another computer. He wanted to build an icon. In 1998, he introduced the iMac G3. It was translucent, colorful, and it looked like it was from another planet. In an era of boring beige boxes, Apple gave the world personality. The I in iMac stood for the Internet, and it signaled Apple's entry into the digital age. But the real revolution started in 2001. Jobs realized that the PC was becoming the digital hub for our lives. He looked at the music industry and saw chaos. People were stealing music on Napster, and CD players were clunky. Jobs introduced the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket. It wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the first one that felt like magic. To make it work, Jobs did what no one else could. He convinced the giants of the music industry, Universal, Sony, Warner, to sell their songs for 99 cents on the iTunes store. He saved the music industry from its own destruction. Then came the year that changed everything. 2007. At the Moscone Center in San Francisco, Jobs walked on stage for what would be the most legendary keynote in history. He told the world he was launching 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. As the audience cheered for 3 separate devices, Jobs delivered the punchline. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. The industry laughed. Microsoft and BlackBerry thought a phone without a keyboard would fail. They were wrong. Jobs hadn't just built a phone. He had put the power of a computer in every human's pocket. He had successfully out-innovated every enemy who had ever doubted him. Steve Jobs' life was a masterclass in the art of the comeback. In 2005, standing before a crowd of graduates at Stanford University, he reflected on being fired from Apple in 1985. He called it awful-tasting medicine, but said the patient needed it. It freed him from the burden of being successful and allowed him to enter his most creative period. His revenge was never about spite. It was about excellence. He didn't spend his time attacking John Scully or the board that betrayed him. He spent his time building things so beautiful and so powerful that the world had no choice but to notice. When Jobs passed away in 2011, he didn't just leave behind a company. He left behind a philosophy. He taught us that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. He left Apple with a multi-trillion-dollar blueprint that continues to dominate the world today. He proved that failure isn't a permanent state, it's a pivot point. The garage startup kid who was kicked out of his own house returned to build a temple of innovation. So, the next time you face a setback, or someone tells you that your dream is over, remember the man from Los Altos. Remember the 90-day clock. Remember that your greatest revenge is your own massive success. Thanks for watching Blueprint Noir. Every empire starts with a vision, but only those with the right blueprint survive the storm. If you want to master the art of business and strategy, subscribe and join our inner circle. The journey is just beginning.